Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be discussing the 1996 film Scream as suggested by these lovely subscribers here. Immediately we get the Scream title screen and we don't get to meet any of the main characters just yet, but we do get to meet Casey. Casey is home alone at night when she receives a call from a stranger. We'll come to know this stranger as Ghostface. And poor Casey, this situation with the whole phone conversation with a stranger could have been completely avoided if it were like this day and age. We have our phones and they literally tell us when a scammer is calling. Scammer call, killer call. You're gonna answer this call and then you're gonna get killed. You're getting a call from a killer. Casey ends up having an extended conversation with Ghostface. He's asking her what her favorite scary movie is. They're kind of having like a little flirty conversation and it's all fun and games until Ghostface implies that he can see Casey. Ghostface asks, "What's your name?" Casey is like, "Why do you want to know my name?" This man goes, "I want to know who I'm looking at." Casey clocks this immediately and she starts freaking out and he tries to play it off and be like, "Oh no, I asked, I want to know who I'm talking to." She's like, "That's not what you said, I'm hanging up." She hangs up the phone. She starts looking outside. She is like locking her doors. And oh my gosh, the way that I would have been shitting bricks, because if that were me in that situation and a man is like, "Oh, I want to know who I'm looking at," he would have literally had to been inside of my house because I have curtains. Unlike Casey is living damn near in a glass house, all windows. You can see right through that bitch, which is a very bold choice. But honestly, if I was Casey and I had that blonde bob with bangs, a triple B, I would have had no curtains, no blinds, no shades either, because everybody would need to see that. And also, Casey's really about to piss me off too, because why the fuck are you barely locking your doors now? This is what it takes for you to barely lock your doors? And it's like, I get it too. I'm guilty of like leaving my door unlocked too for like maybe like 5 minutes. It's usually after my Costco trip and I have to carry a shit ton of shit upstairs. I'm on the 3rd floor. No elevator. So it's like, you know what I mean? I have to pick my pros and cons. Like, do I want to pass out right here or do I want to lock my door immediately? You know what I mean? So Ghostface calls Casey again. She hangs up and they kind of go back and forth for a bit until she gets like mad at Ghostface. She's like, you know, leave me the fuck alone. And he's like, "If you hang up again, I'm going to kill your ass," for lack of better words. Ghostface tells her that he wants to play a game with her, and then he calls her Blondie because she's a blonde. If that were me and it was that time of night, he would have been calling me Bonnet. So this triggers Casey to begin locking all the doors in her house, which one, hella doors, two, a lot of them were unlocked, and I counted approximately 6 doors in this fucking house. Why are there so many doors? And riddle me poor, but back in my day, you know, houses had 1, 2 doors, maybe 3, a front door, a back door, and possibly a side door. Casey looks out the front door and she's threatening to call the cops, and Ghostface tells her that she's in the middle of nowhere and that the cops wouldn't get there in enough time, which isn't a big enough threat for me. I would have literally hung up and called the cops. Like, I don't care, but she doesn't. She hangs up, then hears the doorbell ring, and then just as she's like, okay, fuck it, I'm calling the cops, Ghostface calls again, and Casey starts freaking the fuck out, and she's like, "You better leave, my boyfriend's he's gonna come over here, he's gonna beat your ass, he's on his way right now." And Ghostface calls her boyfriend by name. He's like, "Oh, you're talking about Steve, bitch? Check your patio." Steve is out there, health points down, he's tied up on one of the chairs, and he looks beat up. It looks like he's been tussled with a bit. So Casey tries to go outside to save him. Ghostface is like, "I wouldn't do that." So then she turns the patio light off, keeps the door locked, which I don't know. I feel like maybe I would have risked it for the biscuit, because it's like, it seems like it would have been a 2-on-1 situation if she got out there fast enough and untied him, but she doesn't. And Ghostface challenges her to a game of trivia with the category being scary movies. So eventually Casey gets an answer wrong, resulting in Steve's death. And that is another reason, talk your shit, Daphne, that's another reason why we wouldn't have been caught up here. Daphne would have clocked that tea before I had a chance to clock that tea. Let him know, Daph. Ghostface tells Casey that there's a bonus question, and y'all guess what the bonus question is? She has to guess which door that he's at. And we have already established that Casey has hella doors in her home. So right around here, I would have felt like, oh shit, I'm fucked. I'm actually gonna fucking die. But Ghostface narrows it down to the one front door that she has and the thousands, the plethora of patio doors that she has. But Casey is too shaken up to answer any questions, so she doesn't answer any questions. So Ghostface throws a chair through a window in the house, and Casey, quick thinking, runs to the kitchen. She grabs a knife and then runs back outside. So at this point, Casey can see her parents driving in the distance. They're pretty far. They're not close enough to where she could be like, "Hey, come and help me," without getting spotted. Casey can literally see Ghostface inside running around the house trying to find her. Casey starts making a run towards her parents, who are now pulling up in the driveway. Like, they're right there, but Ghostface spots her, grabs her, stabs her. By the time Casey's parents make it into the house, they realize that there has been some form of an intrusion, and so Casey's mother tries to call the police, but Casey is still on the other line, and you could literally hear her struggling for her life, trying to breathe as Ghostface is dragging her outside. So then Casey's father tells Casey's mothers to go run to their neighbor's place for, I guess, for sanctuary, for safety. And so she goes outside and literally finds Casey's body, and it's actually really sad. So later on that night, we get to meet our main character and protagonist, Sidney Prescott. Sidney is at home. She's in her little nighty gown when her boyfriend, Billy Loomis, surprises her by popping up in her window, which, mind you, is on the second floor. So naturally, she sees him, she screams. So Sidney's father hears her screaming and runs to her bedroom to check on her. Billy hides, and Sidney assures her father that everything is okay, and we find out that Sidney's father is going to be out of town for the weekend. So Sidney's father goes off doing whatever the fuck he was doing, leaving Sidney alone with Billy in her room. And Billy was basically there to pressure her about sex, which we don't like that. That is a red flag right there, if I've ever seen a red flag. And I think the way that the analogy that he makes is really fucking weird, okay? He tells Sidney that he was home and he was watching The Exorcist and thought about her. Not a good sign. That would have pissed me off very much so, because where's the correlation with that? Sidney is also looking confused, like, where the fuck is the correlation? She was like, you thought of me watching The Exorcist? There's not even any bit of romance in there. Like, it's like with movies like The Faculty, at least there's, like, you know what I mean? There's love connections being made throughout the movie. It's a scary movie, but there's love connections still being made. So anyways, Billy goes on to explain that he was watching the TV rated version and all the good stuff was cut out, and he was like, similarly to our sexual relationship last year, you know, we're going real hot and heavy. We're rated R on our way to an NC-17, and now we're rated for TV. And mind you, the reason why their relationship has slowed down sexually is because this time last year, literally within the upcoming days, is Maureen Prescott's anniversary of her death. Sidney's mother's death. It's the anniversary of her mother's death. And Sidney's mother, Maureen, was assaulted and murdered. Keep that in mind. So Sidney's like, oh, so basically you came here for sex. So Billy's like, no, I just came here for some like over the clothes stuff. And so they start making out. Billy, of course, tries for more. Sidney kicks him out. And before he leaves, Sidney thanks him for the romantic gesture. And I'm like, nothing about this gesture is romantic. It would have been romantic if he was like, oh, here's some flowers with no expectations of sex or anything attached to it. I'll be on my way. But no, he came there specifically for sex and then compared you to The Exorcist. Girl, stand up. As Billy is creeping out of Sidney's window, she flashes him her tatas, and then he goes on about his merry way. So the next day at Woodsboro High, there's a bunch of news reporters and press there covering the death of Casey and Steve from the night before. So Tatum, Sidney's best friend, is basically giving her the rundown of what happened, because Sidney at this point has no clue that this has happened. And as Tatum is doing so, she kind of says something on the lines of, yeah, like they're saying that it's even worse than, referring to Maureen Prescott's murder from the year before. And the way that everybody is being so tone deaf surrounding Maureen's death in front of Sidney is insane to me. Throughout the whole movie, police are there questioning all the students and staff of Woodsboro High, and Sidney herself gets questioned, and we get to meet Deputy Dewey, who just so happens to be Tatum's older brother. So during lunch, Sidney and her friends are discussing the murders of Steve and Casey, and her friend group basically consists of her boyfriend Billy, his best friend Stu Mocker, who is Tatum's boyfriend, and their friend Randy. And for context, Randy is a horror movie fanatic, so that's just something to keep in mind. And let me tell you, they're not taking this seriously at all. The way that they are discussing Steve and Casey is very strange to me, especially because it's like they knew them. We find out that Stu has previously dated Casey, and Randy kind of brings this up as a motive for Stu to be the one to have committed the murders. And it's a very lighthearted conversation, but Tatum explains that it couldn't have been Stu because Stu was with her the night before. And of course, given the very sensitive subject, Sidney is triggered because, you know, it's very similar to when her mom was killed. So she kind of steps away from the conversation. After school, Sidney is home by herself. Mind you, her dad is out of town, which is not great timing at all, given that there's a killer on the loose. And Sidney makes arrangements to stay with Tatum while her father is not home. Tatum agrees to pick her up at 7. So as Sidney is waiting for Tatum to pick her up, Sidney turns to the TV and every channel is covering Steve and Casey's murder. She turns the channel and it is Gail Weathers, who is a reporter and just so happens to be the same reporter that covered her mom's murder the year before. And letting you know right now, Sidney does not like Gail Weathers. We'll explore that a little bit later on. Sidney ends up falling asleep and she wakes up to the phone ringing, and it's Tatum letting her know that she's running a little late but that she's on her way to get her, and it's just a little bit after 7. And Tatum tells Sidney not to worry because Casey and Steve weren't murdered until after 10 p.m. Sidney tells Tatum to hurry. They say goodbye. She hangs up the phone. She goes to lay her head back down, and then the phone starts ringing again. Initially, she thinks that it's Tatum until she hears a voice. We know this voice as Ghostface. Sidney does not know who this person is. Ghostface is over the phone saying like, yeah, it's really scary with all the murders. It's like a scary movie. And so instinctively, Sidney believes the person on the other line to be Randy, who I mentioned before is a horror movie fanatic. So she's like, oh, they're referencing horror movies. This is definitely Randy doing a funny little thing with his voice. The Ghostface is on the phone with her at this point. She still believes that it's Randy. He's asking her what her favorite scary movie is. And Sidney says that she doesn't like scary movies, criticizing tropes like a girl being chased throughout the house. Instead of running out the front door, she runs upstairs. She's like, Randy, you know I don't like scary movies. And he's like, this isn't Randy. And so Sidney's like, what the fuck? And so Ghostface is like, it doesn't matter who I am. The better question is where I am. And Sidney asks where he is. And Ghostface says that he's out on her patio. Sidney goes to investigate and she goes outside, leaving the door wide open, and then proceeds to investigate the patio area. She realizes that whoever's on the other line is fucking with her. She thinks it's a prank because it's very clear that they cannot see her. And she still thinks that it's Randy. She's like, nice try, Randy. Like, I'm hanging up. And Ghostface threatens her and somehow implies that he had some form of involvement with Maureen's murder. So he says something on the lines of, he's like, if you hang up, you're gonna die just like your mother, and your mother didn't want to die. Which could be just like an observation on its own, because it's like, who wants to get murdered? The way that he said it, for me, it feels like it implied that he had something to do with her mom's murder, like he was there or some shit. So Sidney freaks out, hangs up the phone, runs back inside, and she locks herself inside. She puts a little chain lock on, and then in the closet behind her, out comes Ghostface, and he attacks her. And I'm just like, oh gee, how did he get inside? It's not like Sidney left the front door gaping as she went to go investigate the front porch, which is like, technically he could have already been inside the house while she was sleeping. It's just the whole having your back to the front door and being so far away from the front door, anybody could have just slipped in. I digress. It doesn't matter. He's in here now and he's trying to attack her. So Ghostface knocks her down, and I will say Sidney has some fight in her. Like, she's like, you know, she's dodging the knife, and Ghostface grabs her by her hair and hits the back of her head on the floor. And just as Ghostface is about to execute the killing blow, Sidney kicks him in the stomach, knocking him on his back. She quickly stands up and she tries to go out the front door, but like I said, she has a little chain lock and she's struggling for a good minute. And by now, the killer, or Ghostface, has now stood up and he's ready to, you know, do some stabbing and jabbing, and she ultimately has to run upstairs. And I find this very ironic because literally just moments before, when she thought she was on the phone with Randy, she was ridiculing and criticizing horror movies for having like girls running up the stairs instead of out the front door when they're being chased by a killer. And I feel like that is one of those things where it's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. You literally just got hit in the head. Your adrenaline's going. Like, there's no telling how you're going to respond in a situation like that unless you're in a situation like that. Like this one time, if you don't mind a quick story time. Honestly, this is a story that I'm ashamed to tell because it does not paint me in the best light. So me and my sister were studying in her bedroom. I'm laying across the foot of her bed. She's sitting upright at the head of the bed, and I asked my sister if we can turn on some music, the TV or something, because for some reason I need noise to concentrate, otherwise, you know, the voices. So my sister says, no, like I'm not going to be able to study properly if I have noise on. So I say, okay, that's fine. So from behind me, I hear a shuffle, a noise of sorts. Don't know why. My brain instinctively goes, holy shit, somebody's trying to break in. Why somebody would be breaking in into a bedroom window on the second floor, I don't know. As I'm running, trying to escape, I'm like haul assing. I'm fucking sprinting. The only problem is that my feet have yet to touch the ground. I'm literally, the best way I can demonstrate for you is my legs are literally hanging off the edge of the bed. They're running. they're moving, okay? They just have not touched the ground. And so as I'm in the midst of going fucking nowhere, I stop to look up and my sister's just sitting there like, what the fuck? And you know, she has a better vantage point than me because she's sitting upright. My back is to the window. Apparently she turned on the TV. Had my feet been touching the ground, it would have been a blur. It would have been a blur of caramel chocolate. I would have been out of there. But instead, it was like a blur of like little Twixes, little little Kit Kats at the edge of the bed. But that being said, in situations like that, it's easier said than done. You don't really know how you're going to respond unless you're in a situation like that. So Sidney runs upstairs and Ghostface is on her ass. She runs her into the bedroom. She locks herself in the bedroom. Ghostface is trying to get in. The phone line is dead for whatever reason. So Sidney tries to type to, you know, contact 911. It works. She turns around, Ghostface is gone, and just as she realizes Ghostface is gone, not a moment later, Billy pops up in her window. So she's excited to see Billy. Sidney runs, she embraces him. She's like, oh my gosh, like there's a killer here. And Billy is comforting her. He's like, he's gone, it's okay. And then Billy's cell phone drops. And we didn't know Billy had a cell phone before, clearly, because Sidney is looking at him like he is the murderer. So she's like, oh my God, it's you. You're the killer. And so she backs up. She runs away and goes downstairs. And this is a very interesting response that Sidney has here, because personally, even if I didn't know my boyfriend had a cell phone, which keep in mind, having a cell phone during this time, not everybody had a cell phone like how they do today. So this is like, it is a very suspicious thing, but I don't think it would have occurred to me, assuming that my boyfriend is a green flag. I would be like, holy shit, I didn't know you had a cell phone. Thank God, call the fucking police. But Sidney sees that cell phone and she's like, you literally just tried to murder me, and I will see justice. So she runs downstairs. Dewey is downstairs and the police are downstairs, and ultimately Billy gets arrested. So Tatum pulls up, she's late as fuck, and they all head down to the police station for Sidney to make a statement and for Billy to get questioned. So, you know, given the circumstance, they're trying to contact Sidney's dad. They cannot contact him. Like, they don't know where he's at. He hasn't made it to his hotel, and nobody can reach him at this time. Billy is being interrogated in the sheriff's office, and Billy's dad is there. And I don't love the setup of this scene at all, because like I said, they're in the sheriff's office. There is a glass window, and Sidney, who just accused Billy of attempting to murder her, is right there. Like, he can literally, Billy at some point turns around, looks out the window, and Sidney is right there. And I just feel like that is a no-no. Like, I feel like they should have been in two separate areas entirely. So Billy's dad is defending him, and they're like, it's very common to have a cell phone. He didn't do this. Until the sheriff is like, okay, you snuck into Sidney's bedroom last night. What was that about? Like, that was the same night that Casey and Steve got murdered. Like, where else did you go? And now Billy's dad is looking concerned because he's like, I didn't even know you were out last night. And so now Billy's dad has gotten a little quiet. So the sheriff tells Billy and Billy's dad that Billy is going to have to get booked until they can clear his phone records. So what they basically are doing is cross-referencing Casey's phone calls with Sidney's phone calls to see if they can find the number, find the connection, basically find out which number called them both, and whoever's number that is, they're gonna, you know, assume to be the killer. So as they're booking Billy is begging his dad, like, tell them I'm innocent, and the dad is like, just wait for a lawyer, because now I don't know who you are because you snuck out last night and I don't know what the fuck's going on. He doesn't say all that, but you know, I'm an empath. I can only assume that that's what his dad was feeling in that moment. So then they're dragging him past Sidney, which again, why aren't they in separate rooms? And he's like, Sidney, I didn't do this. Sidney, it's not me. And so they drag him off. So Sidney leaves the police station with Dewey and Tatum because, like I said, she's going to be spending the night with them. And the sheriff tells him to leave out the back because there's all sorts of press and news reporters out in front trying to talk to Sidney, given that she was just attacked by the killer. Sidney, Tatum, and Dewey leave out the back. And as they're leaving out the back, Gail Weathers is up front with her cameraman Kenny, and she tells Kenny, like, hey, I think that there is some way that we can get in through the back. And mind you, this whole time too, like, and this is like, I get the movie was made in the 90s, it was just something that I fucking noticed, and their mouths are not moving at all during this conversation, and it is so funny to me. But nonetheless, Gail and Kenny go to the back, and they see Sidney is outside. They go rush Sidney, and Gail is like, Sidney, what happened? Are you okay? And Tatum, trying to defend Sidney, tells her to back off. And Sidney, very passive aggressively, is like, no, Tatum, it's fine. She's just doing her job. Mind you, very passive aggressive. Gail cannot read the room at all and does not know what's coming. So Sidney very passive aggressively asks Gail how her book is coming along. And so Gail's book covers her mom's murder. And so Sidney's like, oh, I'll look for the book. And Gail very friendly is like, oh, I'll send you a copy. And when I tell you, Sidney punches the shit out of Gail. And she does so with such upright posture. I need to put this in a perspective for you. Sidney punches the shit out of Gail, and Sidney is like this when she punches Gail, right? Like, she didn't lean into it. She didn't put her whole body into that shit. She hit her with this, and Gail falls on her ass. She doesn't fall on her ass technically because Kenny catches her, but if Kenny wasn't behind her, she would have been on her ass. And I can just only imagine if, like, Sidney really put her all in that and really leaned into that bitch, she would have probably had a concussion. There's no telling what would have happened. She would have probably had a broken cheekbone. Now we're at Tatum and Dewey's home. They live with their mother. And so Tatum and Sidney are in her bedroom and they're just like talking. And Tatum is like, do you really think that Billy did this? And Sidney is like, he was there. Like, there's no other way to put it. He was there. And Tatum looks a little bit too excited. And she says something on the lines of, oh, like, I knew Billy was just too perfect. Bitch, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? Because it's like, imagine just getting attacked and accusing your boyfriend of murdering you or attempting to murder you, and your best friend says some weird ass shit like that. So Tatum's mom comes into the bedroom and she tells Sidney that there's somebody on the phone for her. So mind you, they've been trying to contact Sidney's father. So she's like, oh, maybe it's my dad. She picks up the phone. It's fucking Ghostface. And Sidney is like freaking out. And Ghostface is like, oh, he's like, you fingered, which is weird wording. He's like, you fingered the wrong guy again. And again, we're like, what is he talking about? We get context like literally the very next scene, the next morning. Sidney, Tatum, Dewey, and their mom are downstairs. They're having breakfast and the news is on and they're covering Sidney's attack. With Sidney comes the past of her mother's murder. And so they're talking about Maureen Prescott and how Sidney testified against a man named Cotton Weary as the man who assaulted and murdered her mother. And so Cotton is up for the death penalty. And like I said, Sidney identified him as her mother's killer. And so Dewey turns the TV off like a little bit too late. As soon as they started talking about Sidney, that the TV should have been off. But I understand, I'm being facetious. I understand that they needed that additional context for us, the audience. But IRL, in real life, that is, they should have had the TV off as soon as they mentioned Sidney. And basically Dewey tells Sidney that they released Billy because they checked his phone and his phone was clear and none of the phone calls that were made to Casey or her were from his cell phone. Tatum and Sidney are back at Woodsboro High and all the press is there, the news reporters are there, including Gail Weathers. Sidney confronts Gail about her book and then we kind of get more information as to why Sidney doesn't like Gail. And basically Gail's book is covering the death of Maureen Prescott, but it's also defending Cotton Weary and claiming his innocence. This theory that Gail has is defaming Sidney and her mother, and it's kind of ruining her mother's reputation. So that's why Sidney doesn't like this theory at all. Sidney's perspective of things, she's seen Cotton Weary leaving their house covered in her mother's blood. Now, what Cotton and Gail are saying is that Maureen had a consensual sexual relationship with Cotton. He left her place drunk, leaving his jacket, and then a separate person entirely, the killer, came in, killed her, took his jacket, planted the jacket in Cotton's car with Maureen's DNA, framing him. The whole conversation, Sidney's being a little defensive and she's talking about how her mother would have never had sex with Cotton. It seems like she doesn't want to believe the possibility that Cotton is innocent. I do feel that Sidney is being very delusional about Cotton and the potential of him being innocent and her mother's infidelity, just because at this point, Ghostface has already implied that he was the one who murdered her mother and that she identified Cotton incorrectly as being her mother's killer. So it's just kind of like, girl, lock in, because why would somebody else be taking the blame for something like that? We're now inside Woodsboro High, and Sidney's classmates are not taking this shit seriously at all. There's literally kids running around with the Ghostface costumes, ripping and running around the hallway. This is, of course, very upsetting for Sidney just because of everything that's going on, her nearly getting attacked, everything going on with Cotton. It's just a mess. And Stu seems very excited about this. Like, he's describing everything going on as fucking Christmas. this, which is weird and a red flag if you ask me. So Sidney is distraught. She runs away and quite literally runs into Billy. And of course she's like a little shaken up just because given the circumstance and given everything that's going on. And Billy's like, you don't still think that I'm the killer, do you? And Sidney explains that she doesn't believe that he's still the killer because she got a call from the killer while she was at Tatum's. And at the time, Billy was in jail. So it couldn't have been him that made that phone call. Sidney is apologizing and she's like, please understand. And then Billy interrupts her and is like, understand what? That you would rather think that I'm a psychopathic killer than touch me? And I'm like, how are we circling back to sex right now? This is fucking crazy. And I'm like, psychotic? Who the fuck? Who said psychotic? I'm like, now you're putting words in my mouth. And then Billy doubles down and is like, you haven't been the same since your mom passed. It's been a year. You should be over it by now. And then proceeds to compare his mother abandoning him and leaving his dad and their family to her mother getting murdered. Which is like, I get how that could be a traumatic thing, but that's like the equivalent of me getting a paper cut and then somebody screaming their fucking head off because they've been stabbed and me going like, relax, it's really not that crucial. Like, you need to calm down. Doesn't that sound fucking crazy? Billy is like, I just want my girlfriend back. And Sidney, of course, is very upset by this conversation, as I would be, as anybody would be, because it's so tone deaf and just so ridiculous. She runs and she goes and runs into the restroom. So Sidney's in the girls' restroom and she hears two girls talking shit about her. And one of the girls is basically saying that they believe that Sidney lied about being attacked. So Sidney hears this and she goes and runs and hides in one of the stalls before the other two girls come out of their stalls. So she runs in, they walk out. I would have been out there waiting for them. I would have been like, what the fuck? What are we doing right now? I wouldn't have been Sidney Prescott that day. I would have been Sidney Press-a-bitch. I was like, y'all better ask somebody. Y'all better ask Gail about me. So Sidney is in the stall and she continues listening to this conversation between these two girls. And one of the girls is really going in with some like random ass bullshit. And she's accusing Sidney of murdering Casey and Steve. And the other girl's like, what motive would there have been? And she was like, maybe she's sleeping with Steve. And she was like, it would make sense. Her mom was a slut, so she's a slut. And I'm like, what are we doing right now? This is wild as fuck. Now I can kind of see why Sidney was being delusional about her mom potentially having an affair. Sidney comes out the stall. She's obviously upset after hearing that conversation and she hears her name being whispered in the bathroom. And so to investigate, Sidney gets on her hands and knees in a public restroom to look underneath the stalls when she literally had the option of just walking out. So then Ghostface pops out of one of the stalls and she runs out of there. And it's very unclear if it is the Ghostface or if it's one of her classmates fucking with her. Just the vibe, I feel like it was actually the killer. Either way, the principal announces that school is canceled for the rest of the day. And he also announces that the police department has issued a curfew for the entire city. And so as this is happening, Gail is trying to push information out of Dewey and she compliments him, like I guess she's trying to like rizz him up, trying to flirt with him a little bit to get some information, and tells him that he doesn't look a day over 12. This is a weird thing to say. Now, obviously, he looks older than 12. It was just a weird thing to say. As Gail is having this conversation with Dewey, we find out that Sidney's father has not been ruled out as a suspect because remember, they haven't been able to find him or reach him in any way, and all this shit is going down. So it's after school. Sidney is walking with Stu and Tatum, and Stu is saying that he's having a party at his place to celebrate classes being canceled. Classes are being canceled because students are getting murdered. And it takes little to no convincing for Sidney to agree to go to this party. Also, I want to point out during this scene too, and this is completely random, it has nothing to do with the plot at all. I don't know what it is about Tatum's outfit, like the hairstyle, the outfit, everything was giving. I thought that shit was so fucking cute. Meanwhile, inside Woodsboro High, the principal is inside getting murdered. And I love that they made like a Freddy Krueger reference and the janitor is like literally dressed like Freddy Krueger and his name is Fred. Tatum and Sidney are alone and they're basically talking about everything that's going on. So Tatum tells Sidney that she thinks that Cotton could be innocent and that her mom could have very well been having an affair, which let me know your thoughts on that, because I feel like that is such a sensitive conversation and such a sensitive topic. I wouldn't even have touched on that at all. And I don't know if that makes Tatum a good friend or a bad friend or what. I just know I wouldn't have been touching that conversation. And if I absolutely felt the need to have that conversation, I don't think I would outright be like, I think that the man you identified as your mother's killer is innocent. I would probably just like ask questions for us to get on the same page. Sidney, do we think that the killer saying that you falsely identified Cotton means anything. So Sidney, of course, gets defensive, and she's like, if they were having an affair, why couldn't he prove that in court? Then Tatum says something on the lines of, well, this goes further back. Like, there's been rumors and talk of there being other men that your mom was having an affair with. She was like, your dad is out of town a lot. Like, it's not unlikely that this has happened. Sidney says, if that's true, then that means that the killer is still out there. And the whole time that they're having this conversation, Ghostface is just like lurking around in the woods behind them. So Sidney and Tatum continue their conversation as they're grocery shopping. They're getting food and stuff for Stu's party. And Sidney is basically confiding in Tatum and is telling Tatum that she feels bad for not wanting to have sex and not being sexually active with Billy. And she's like, Billy's been so patient with me. Ghostface is also there in the grocery store. And I'm like, how is nobody seeing this shit? Out in the middle of the woods, okay, but in the fucking grocery store, nobody's seen that? So mind you, Sidney's dad is still MIA, and the police chief is having a conversation with Dewey. The phone calls that align between Casey and Sidney are from Sidney's father's phone. So the chief points out that Maureen's anniversary, the death of her anniversary, is tomorrow. And so he believes that that is the motive for Sidney's father. And he's like, don't bring anything up. We're going to try to bring him in and talk to him first, and then we'll try to figure this shit out. Later on that night, Dewey drops off Sidney and Tatum at Stu's for his party, which I still am having a really hard time understanding that. Why are they there at all? I feel like Dewey, Tatum, and Sidney should have been in one place all together, in one room, back up against the wall, Dewey guarding the door, something. But at a party with alcohol? So Gail and Kenny are also at the party. They're parked outside inside their little news van, and Dewey approaches Gail, and Gail asks if she can go inside of the party with Dewey. So Gail plants a camera in the party so she can see what's going on from inside the news van. And mind you, they're being all super flirty and stuff, and it's just only like a little awkward between Gail and Sidney as they walk past each other in the party. At this point, Stu has asked Tatum to go into the garage to get more beers for everybody. So she goes into the garage to gather more beers. The door shuts and locks behind her, and she tries to leave out the garage, like the actual garage door, and she opens it, she goes to leave out, and then the garage closes, she looks behind her, it's Ghostface. And so Tatum sees Ghostface and thinks that it's Randy, like, pulling a prank. It is not. She finds out very quickly that it's the real Ghostface. And when she tries to escape, she tries to leave through like the little doggy door in the garage, and that's like some skinny legend shit right there. I love that for her, that she was like, and I really, in my heart of hearts, I think she could have fit through there, because it looked like her shoulders could have fit through. I don't even think I could get a single thigh through that dog door. But you know, love that for Tatum, but she doesn't get through. Ghostface hits the garage button, the garage goes up, and she breaks her neck up against like the garage door frame in the garage door, and so now Tatum, she's been cut. There's no more Tatum. So as I said, Gail planted a camera in the party, and so her and Kenny are watching the party from inside the news van, and just as they're doing so, Dewey approaches the van and invites Gail to go on a stroll with him to investigate an abandoned car on the side of the road. After tumbling down into a wooded area, Gail and Dewey end up kissing, and they end up finding the abandoned car, and they find out that it's Sidney's father's car. And so they're like, he's here at this party, we gotta go run back to the house. Mind you, Sidney's father is a suspect at this point. Before and during Gail and Dewey discovering the car, the remaining party guests are watching horror movies with Randy, and Randy is basically explaining different horror movie rules and like how to survive a horror movie, and he's saying to never have sex, and that virgins always survive, and to not drink or do any drugs. As he's explaining these rules, the house phone rings, he answers and finds out that the principal's body was found dead. And so these weird ass fucking kids are like, oh my god, let's go see, because they hate their fucking principal. And it's like, I get it, I get hating your principal, but that much? That's crazy. A bunch of people leave to go look at the principal's body, which is weird, and this leaves Randy alone downstairs. Billy has arrived to the party, and him and Sidney are upstairs. And so Billy is apologizing, and then Sidney's like, no, I'm the one who needs to be sorry. I've just been so self-absorbed and selfish lately. And she's basically saying that she can't keep grieving her mother, and she can't keep denying who her mother was. And I'm like, girl, I feel like grieving is one of those things that like never goes away. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like, maybe some days it's easier, maybe some days it's not as easy, but for her to put herself in this position where she's pressuring herself to quickly like grieve her mother's death and quickly have sex with Billy, it's just too much going on. And here goes Billy comparing Sidney to yet another horror film And I'm like, at what point do we call this behavior out? Because it's like, you're not gonna keep comparing me to horror films. So Billy compares her to Jodie Foster's character in Silence of the Lambs, and how Jodie Foster's character keeps having flashbacks of her deceased father. He's like, oh, you're like her. And so Sidney's like, no, but this isn't a movie. This is real life. And Billy's like, oh, but this is a movie. We just can't choose our genre.
Sorry, not everybody fits in the bad bitch genre. It's a genre.
Sidney, I don't like Sidney's Riz. I don't like Sidney's Riz at all, because then she goes, why can't my life be like a good porno? I cringed so hard. And this was like her cue, I guess, her saying that she wanted to have sex. And Billy is like, are you sure? And then Sidney goes, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, get that shit out of here. Get that weak shit out of here. We only do hard consent around here. I need a hard yes from you, Sidney. Don't do this, please. But they have sex. And after they have sex, they're getting dressed, and Sidney is just sitting there. She sees a phone on the nightstand, and I guess this triggers her to ask Billy, who did you call? And it's unclear what she's talking about at first, and she's asking, when you were in jail, who did you call? Billy explains, I called my dad. And Sidney's like, no, you didn't. I saw the sheriff call your dad. And Billy's like, well, yeah, because I didn't get an answer when I called, so then he called. And Billy's like, you don't still think I'm the killer, do you? And Sidney fixes her fucking mouth to say, sorry, let me calm down. Sidney fixes her mouth to say, oh no, I just thought it would be funny if you used your one phone call to call me to throw me off. Mind you, Sidney got a phone call from the killer while she was at Tatum. She's basically suggesting that when she got that call from the killer, it was actually Billy to try to throw her off of his trail. And this has got to be the most horrendous case of post-nut clarity I've ever had the pleasure of witnessing. Because girl, what the fuck do you mean? Why? I feel like if you've just had sex with your boyfriend the first time, and you have a thought of, maybe that was a little premature, maybe that was before I was ready, but maybe this motherfucker tried to kill me, should not be a question at all. That should have all been processed and thought of before y'all had sex. Sidney, what the fuck? So now Billy is like, what do I have to do to prove to you that I'm not the killer? And so as he's saying this, Ghostface pops up behind him and stabs him. So now Ghostface is chasing Sidney all up through the second floor of the house. She ends up in the attic. She ends up falling from the attic window and landing, like, I guess it looks like a boat that's covered. So she lands pretty safely. Like, she's able to get up and run. She's running. Ghostface is still upstairs at this point. She sees Tatum's body in the garage door, and then she runs to the news van, and Kenny is there. Kenny sees the killer on the camera in the house, but there's a 30-second delay on the camera. And so initially he goes to save Randy because he sees the killer is standing behind Randy, but then we see the killer leaving out the door, and like I said, there's a delay. So as we see the killer on the camera leaving the door, the killer pops up and stabs Randy. Now Sidney is again being chased by Ghostface, and as this is happening, Dewey and Gail run back to the house. Dewey goes inside of the house to investigate, like, and he's there to find Sidney's father, so he's calling out Sidney's father's name. Gail runs to the news van because they have a cell phone in the van, and so she sees that there's blood. She's like, what the hell? She gets in the front seat and she pulls out her phone to call for help, and Randy pops up out of nowhere. She hits Randy with the phone because she's freaking out. She gets in the car. She starts driving. Gail drives off. Sidney is in the middle of the road, and to avoid hitting Sidney, Gail drives off into a ditch. And so Sidney continues running towards the house. She runs to the house and she sees Dewey, and she's like, oh my God, Dewey. But then Dewey has been stabbed. Dewey falls over. Ghostface pops up. She runs to the police car, and unfortunately, Ghostface has the keys to the police car, and so she's trying to keep herself locked in. And over the police radio, Sidney calls for help. Ghostface pops up from the back seat of the car. She gets out of the police car, turns around, Ghostface is gone. So she's like running towards the house. She grabs Dewey's gun, and just as she's doing so, Randy and Stu are running up to the house, and they're both accusing each other of being the killer. And Sidney leaves them both outside. She says, fuck y'all both, and locks herself inside, which also, I mean, it's like, it might be selfish, but also same, because it's like, you don't know who to trust at this point. She locks herself in, and here comes Billy from upstairs. He starts to go outside. Sidney's like, no, don't go outside. And he's like, it's okay, give me the gun. Sidney gives Billy the gun. Billy opens the door, and Randy runs in, and he's like, Stu is out there, he's gone mad. And here goes Billy with the gun, quoting another scary movie, and fucking shoots Randy. So mind you, Billy is not injured at all, and he talks about how the blood on him is actually corn syrup, as they used in the movie Carrie. And like I said, he starts quoting all these scary movies and shit. So now Sidney is freaked out because, oh my god, Billy's the killer. So he runs to the kitchen. Stu is there. She's like, oh my god, Stu, Billy's the killer. Here goes Stu speaking in a voice modulator, and now he's talking to Sidney as Ghostface, and he's also the killer. They're both the killers. Billy, Stu, the deadly duo, the murderous pair. Billy and Stu corner Sidney in the kitchen, and they reveal to Sidney that they murdered her mother a year ago and framed Cotton Weary. Sidney is obviously confused, and she's like, why? And Billy refers to Sidney's mother as a slut bag whore. So apparently, Sidney's mother, Maureen, had an affair with Billy's father, and that is what caused Billy's mother to leave his father and essentially abandon Billy. Billy, what the fuck, bro? Because I'm like, of all the people to hold responsible for his mom leaving, he didn't want to kill his dad. And I'm not one to like, you know, plot a murderous crime or anything, but I'm like, we started off with the mistress and not like the person who said that they were committed to your mom, your father. That's a choice. So Stu and Billy reveal their big plan. The whole time they've been holding Sidney's father hostage, and their plan is to basically frame him as they did Cotton and make it look like he snapped on the anniversary of his wife's death. And the way that their plan was working, like they literally cloned her dad's phone and made it look like he was the one calling her and calling Casey. Their plan was actually working really well because the sheriff literally had Sidney's father as the main suspect. They pull out Sidney's father, and their goal is to basically kill everybody and then injure themselves and make it look like, I said, the father was responsible for all of this. So they kind of do things in a peculiar order, in my opinion. Before killing Sidney and before killing Sidney's father, Billy and Stu take turns stabbing each other, injuring each other real bad. When they're done doing that, they look for the gun that they're going to use to handle Sidney and her father, except they cannot find the gun. And come to find out, Gail has the gun. Gail is taking charge of the situation. She has Billy in her sights. She's pointing the gun at him, but Billy can tell that the gun's safety is on from where he's standing somehow. Gail tries to shoot him. It doesn't work. He grabs the gun. He kicks her down, turns the safety off, and goes to shoot her. Just before Billy is about to shoot Gail, Stu turns around. Sidney and her father are no longer in the kitchen. So Gail is unconscious. Billy does not shoot her. He runs back into the kitchen trying to find her. And just as he's doing so, the phone rings. And it's Sidney with the voice modulator. And she's telling them in the Ghostface voice that she already called the cops. She's already turned them in. She's already reported them. Now, Billy starts raging. He's raging through the living room. He's like cutting up the furniture and stuff, yelling, trying to find Sidney. Stu can't even help find her because he's feeling a bit woozy because Billy went a little too crazy with stabbing him. He's no help at all. Sidney surprises Billy, pops out of one of the closets downstairs, and she like stabs him with like an umbrella in his shoulder. Stu emerges. Now he's up and running. He goes to attack Sidney. Sidney ends up getting the upper hand, and she ends up smashing the TV on his head, and then TV starts sparking. There's electricity. He's down for the count. And so Sidney goes back into the foyer of the house, and Randy is still alive. He credits to being a virgin as to why he survived. Billy starts to attack Sidney, and Gail, who was once unconscious, is now awake, shoots Billy. And now Gail, Sidney, and Randy are standing over Billy's body. So then Randy, being the horror movie fanatic that he is like, okay, we need to be careful because this is where the killer jumps up for one last scare. And then, like clockwork, Billy jumps up, scares the fuck out of everybody, and then Sidney shoots him. Killing shot, he's gone, he's no more. So the movie concludes. It was once night, now it's morning, it's day. There's news reporters there. Gail is outside covering the events of last night. Dewey is being pushed into an ambulance, and everybody lives happily ever after until it becomes like literally a 20-year-long franchise. Scream is a girthy franchise, if I do say so myself. They got hella movies. They have another one coming out soon. I feel like with Stu and Billy, I really feel like they should have made sure that everybody was dead before they started stabbing each other. Like, I feel like they should have executed the plan full out. I wouldn't even have, personally, not that I would be on some shit like that, but I wouldn't even have divulged my motive at all. It would have just happened quickly. Like, everybody would have been wherever you go after you die, just looking, going, damn, that just happened. It was this bitch the whole time. Honestly, I don't think that they would have investigated further because the sheriff was already hardcore assuming and accusing Sidney's father. So if they were to kill everybody first and then stab each other, they're not going to be like, the amount of blood you've pumped out doesn't time right with the death of the killer. Like, I don't think that they would have done all that. I think they should have handled that first and then did that. But the fact that Billy and Stu successfully murdered Maureen and framed Cotton for the murder for a whole year is honestly insane. That's like actually kind of, I don't want to say impressive because it's not cool, but it's like, yo, they really did that shit. And they were just about to do it again. As they weren't counting on Gail, because Gail low-key saved the day because she acted as a distraction so Sidney and her father could get away in the kitchen. Had Gail not been there, I'm confident that their asses would have been grass. Like, I'm confident everybody would have gotten got. What I like about this Scream in particular is that the movie doesn't even give an opportunity or an inch that there's more than one killer. When Billy is in jail, nobody thought maybe there's an accomplice. Maybe, like, or nobody, at least nobody said it out loud. It was like the whole movie, there's only one killer. And when you look at it as a singular killer, one killer, I feel like that eliminated Billy pretty quickly. And another thing that I wonder about, I wonder if Tatum knew that Maureen was having an affair with Billy's father. And here's how I imagine it, and hear me out. Because there's that scene with Tatum and Sidney, and Tatum is telling Sidney that there's been talk of her mother sleeping with other men prior to Cotton. And I don't know why, I just imagine that being something that Stu accidentally told Tatum, or maybe it was a conversation in passing that they have, like, you know how couples are, where it's like they spill tea with each other, they gossip with each other. It makes me wonder if he told Tatum, like, yeah, you know, don't tell Sidney, but I heard that her mother was having an affair with Billy's father, and that's why Billy's mother left. You know what I mean? I could see that coming up in conversation. There's two scenes in particular that I thought were very interesting too, and both scenes are with Sidney, Tatum, and Ghostface. So there's a scene with Sidney and Ghostface. She's on the phone with Ghostface, and she assumes that the person over the phone is Randy because of the horror film references. Then there's the scene with Tatum and Ghostface where she's at Stu's party and she's in the garage and she assumes that it's Randy. And they're all pointing fingers at Randy, and I think just because of his whole obsession with horror movies. But they completely omitted Billy from this because Billy throughout the entire movie is making horror movie references. And granted, he doesn't start referencing scary movies as hardcore as Randy until the end of the movie and until it's revealed that he is the killer. I also really like how there's this push and pull with Billy's character where you go from, okay, he definitely did it, and then, okay, maybe he didn't do it, maybe he's not the killer, and you're kind of going back and forth like this throughout the movie. You have the initial situation where Sidney accuses him, and then it's like, okay, he didn't do it because she got a call from the killer while he was in jail, and his phone was clear, so you know, he didn't do it. And then you have this scene, everybody is at Randy's job, and Randy works at a videotape store, like a fucking Blockbuster. I remember going to Blockbuster. I remember my Blockbuster, like the Blockbuster outside of my parents' neighborhood, was attached to a Radio Shack. Now it's like a Baskin Robbins. Real sad stuff. During the scene, Randy hits the nail on the head in accusing Billy of being the killer. And he also hit the nail on the head too with Stu in the beginning of the movie. Casey, one of our very first victims, was dating Stu at some point. So he clocked that immediately. He clocked Billy in this scene in the VHS store. The only issue is that Randy is confiding in Stu, of all people, about Billy being the killer potentially. Even while Randy is having this conversation with Stu, Stu is saying, well, Sidney's father is still missing, like still trying to put the blame on Sidney's father because that's their whole plan, trying to throw Randy off. And Randy's like, no, Sidney's father is a red herring. He's not the killer. It's Billy. As Randy is saying that Billy is the killer, Billy is behind him and has overheard part of the conversation. And Billy confronts Randy in a way that feels very much so that he's the killer. And then it's like, you get that vibe, like, okay, Billy's acting very strange. Billy is acting as if he is the killer. And then he gets stabbed by Ghostface after him and Sidney have sex. You know what I mean? Like, so it's this back and forth of, oh my gosh, he's the killer. Oh my gosh, he's not the killer. And I think that that's very fun. Before we conclude, I would like to give a super thanks to my super thanks. And there's literally no pressure, seriously, for y'all to donate to the channel at all. I literally have that between us. I literally have that feature set up in case this channel acquires a very wealthy benefactor. So if you know a very wealthy benefactor, please send him to my super thanks. Yes, again, thank you all so much. And like I said, please, please, please do not feel pressured to do that at all. Your subscribing, your comment, your engagement is more than enough. And I sincerely, like, I really appreciate it. That's so unbelievably sweet. But yes, that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. I hope that your boyfriend is not a psychopath and a murderer. I don't know any way for you to be able to clock that, but the second you do clock it, I hope you get out. Okay, bye. Daphne, say bye. Daphne says bye. Say bye. Oh, that's an angel. That is an angel. Little bundle of joy. Okay, bye.